Lewis Hamilton was faster. Everyone could see it. He had 4 laps of extra tire life on his own teammate, he was catching him at nearly a second a lap, and third place, a Ferrari podium, was sitting right there in front of him. Then he watched it disappear. Great waste of time there, guys. That's Lewis Hamilton on live team radio in the middle of the Dutch Grand Prix, telling his own team they'd just thrown away his race. And 24 hours later, the man in charge of that team didn't deny it happened. He confirmed it, on purpose. Let's set the scene properly, because the details here matter. Dutch Grand Prix, Zandvoort, Sunday the 23rd of August. Lando Norris takes the win for McLaren. Behind him, it's a Mercedes 1-2, Kimi Antonelli 2nd, George Russell 3rd. Hamilton comes home 4th, Leclerc 5th. On paper, that looks like a quiet result. A podium miss, nothing dramatic, but the real story isn't where Hamilton finished, it's the 11 laps in the middle of that race where Ferrari had a decision in front of them and got it wrong in real time, in front of the entire world watching. Here's what happened. Hamilton ran long in his first stint. That's a deliberate strategy, stay out longer than your rivals. Sacrifice track position early to build a fresher set of tires for the second half of the race. By lap 40, it had clearly worked. Hamilton was flying. He caught his own teammate, Charles Leclerc, and he was lapping roughly a second faster than him. In Formula One, when a faster car is stuck behind a slower teammate on the same strategy, the fix is obvious team orders. Move the slower car aside, let the faster one race for position. Mercedes did exactly that in this same race. We'll get to that in a moment. Ferrari didn't, not straight away. Ferrari called Leclerc into the pits on lap 41. Leclerc didn't come in. He was left out an extra lap, partly because the team didn't want to follow George Russell's Mercedes into the pit lane and tip off their strategy to a rival. Leclerc finally boxed on lap 43. That's 2 full laps of Hamilton stuck behind a car he was clearly faster than in a race where he'd eventually lose out on 3rd place by less than a second, not a second and a half, not 2 seconds, 0.849 of a second. That's the exact margin between Hamilton in 4th and Russell in 3rd at the finish line. 2 wasted laps behind your own teammate in a race decided by less than the time it takes to blink. And the frustration didn't stop there. At another point in the race, when the pit wall gave Hamilton an unclear answer about which tire compound would actually be quickest, he asked the team, only half joking, whether they were using him as a guinea pig. That's a driver who no longer trusts the information coming from his own strategists in the middle of a live race. You don't need to be a strategist yourself to understand why Hamilton was angry. You just need to watch the gap. And here's what makes it worse for Ferrari. In the exact same race, Mercedes faced the identical situation and solved it in seconds. With the race entering its closing laps, Mercedes needed Kimi Antonelli, their title contender, to have a real shot at chasing down Norris for the win. George Russell was ahead of him on track at the time. Mercedes made the call instantly. Russell moved aside. Antonelli got the clear track he needed to go and attack for the lead. No hesitation, no confusion, no extra lap. Just a decision, made and executed. Hamilton watched that unfold from inside his own car, and he couldn't stop thinking about it afterward. They execute like that, he said. Here I'm sitting back, losing seconds. Something we need to discuss offline. Read between the lines there. Hamilton isn't just annoyed about one pit stop. He's directly comparing his current team to the team he walked away from, the team he left specifically to chase an 8th world title with Ferrari instead. For a 7-time world champion to say on camera that his old team executes better than his current one, that's about as pointed a criticism as a driver can give without naming names any more directly than that. Now, here's where it gets more interesting, because Hamilton wasn't the only Ferrari driver left confused by that call. Charles Leclerc came out of the race just as bewildered as his teammate. I didn't really understand why we had to box so close to George's pit stop, Leclerc said afterward. That really was kind of signing up to finish behind George. Think about what he's actually saying there. Leclerc believes the exact timing of his own pit stop, the same call that held Hamilton up, cost him position too. In his own words, Ferrari handed position to a direct rival before the race had even been decided. Now, you'll see some outlets running with the idea that Ferrari deliberately ordered Leclerc to hold Hamilton up some kind of internal sabotage story. Let's be precise here, because Leclerc actually addressed that directly, and it's worth playing in full rather than assuming the worst. Asked point blank whether he'd been told to block his teammate, Leclerc said, "I didn't receive any message about that. No order, no instruction to hold Hamilton up on purpose." Leclerc's own account is that this was confusion on the pit wall, not a conspiracy against his teammate. He added, trying to keep the peace publicly, "Sometimes I will be frustrated, sometimes Lewis will be frustrated." That's a driver trying to smooth things over, but it's also a driver who's just told the world he didn't understand his own team's decision. On the same afternoon, his teammate called that decision a waste of time on live radio. Two different drivers, two separate complaints, the same race weekend. That's not one driver overreacting. That's a pattern. So how did the man actually running the team respond to all of this? This is the part of the story most channels are skipping past, and it might be the most important part of the whole weekend. Fred Vasseur didn't call the strategy call a mistake. He didn't apologize for it. He confirmed it was deliberate. "We didn't want to tell him the strategy at this stage," Vasseur said, "because we didn't want to disclose it to the competitors." Let that sink in for a second. Ferrari's own team principal is telling us, on the record, that they kept Lewis Hamilton their own driver, mid-race, fighting for a podium finish in the dark about the plan, not because of a system failure, not because of confusion in the heat of the moment, because they didn't trust that the information wouldn't somehow leak to Mercedes or McLaren if Hamilton knew it. Vasseur went further. "We wanted to keep him on track until the end," he said. "I think it would have been the right call." Vasseur isn't defending a mistake here. He's defending a philosophy. His logic is that if Hamilton didn't know the plan, he couldn't accidentally give it away, either through radio chatter or through how he drove on track. It's a defensible idea in theory. In practice, it meant Ferrari's own 7-time world champion was flying blind through the most important 10 laps of his afternoon. And what about the Leclerc pit stop delay, specifically the part that actually cost Hamilton the time on track? Vasseur's answer to that was almost dismissive. "Charles was supposed to pit. We extended one lap, and it was a kind of confusion," he said. "I'm not worried about this. I'm not worried about this." That's the actual quote from Ferrari's team principal in the immediate aftermath of a race where his lead driver had just called the team's execution a waste of time over the radio live for everyone to hear. That's not the sound of a team principal who thinks he has a problem on his hands. And honestly, that response might end up being the bigger story here than the pit stop itself. Vasseur went further still, admitting the whole team, not just the pit wall, had been struggling all weekend with basic decision-making. "I think we were all a bit lost with the compounds," he said. A bit lost. From the team principal of Scuderia Ferrari, the most decorated constructor in the history of the sport, describing his own tire strategy in a race his championship-chasing driver desperately needed to convert into points. Here's why this isn't just a one-weekend story that fades by Wednesday. This result left Hamilton and George Russell dead level on points in the championship, both sitting on 183. Russell holds the higher position only on a tiebreaker. He's got 2 race wins this season to Hamilton's 1, so he edges ahead on countback even though the points tally is identical. That's a subtle but important detail because it means this wasn't Ferrari losing ground on pure numbers. It was a race where Hamilton had a genuine, tangible shot at pulling clear of Russell in the standings and lost that opportunity specifically because of the 2 laps he spent stuck behind his own teammate. Every single point matters this close to the top of the table, and Ferrari's own team principal has now gone on record admitting the team cost Hamilton time through a call he still defends as deliberate policy, not something that needs fixing. And this isn't the first time this season Vasseur has had to manage a Hamilton outburst either. Go back to last November's Las Vegas Grand Prix, a genuinely disastrous qualifying session for Hamilton, who started the race 20th, the worst qualifying result of his entire career. Vasseur's response at the time was blunt. "Let's calm down," he said. To jump out of the car and make the first comment, it's always a bit too much. Notice the pattern forming here. Every time Hamilton reacts publicly to a bad Ferrari weekend, Vasseur's instinct is the same. Play it down. Ask everyone to calm down. Insist there's no real underlying issue. But you can only say, "Let's calm down," so many times before people start asking a different question. Is the problem really Hamilton overreacting, or is it Ferrari's execution that keeps creating the reaction in the first place? To be fair to Hamilton, even he pulled back publicly less than a day later. Barely 24 hours after that radio message went out, he posted a noticeably calmer message himself. "A tough weekend," he wrote, "but we leave with valuable points and signs that we're moving in the right direction." So Hamilton de-escalated. Leclerc downplayed it as just a normal part of team racing. But Vasseur is the one person in this entire story who has gone fully on the record, saying, in effect, we did this on purpose, and given the same situation again, we'd do it again. That's the real headline buried in all of this. Not a driver clash, not a manufactured sabotage story, a team principal openly defending a strategic call that cost his championship-contending driver a genuine shot at a podium and calling it the right decision without hesitation the moment he was asked about it. So here's where Ferrari actually stands after Zandvoort. A driver publicly comparing his current team unfavorably to the team he left behind. A teammate who says he didn't fully understand the call either and lost out from the same decision. And a team principal who isn't apologizing for any of it, he's justifying it confidently in front of the media. Hamilton says the team needs to discuss this offline. Vasseur says everyone will be back in the briefing with a clear picture of what happened. That briefing, whatever quietly comes out of it, is the next thing worth watching closely. If Ferrari changes how it communicates strategy heading into Monza, that's Vasseur tacitly admitting Hamilton had a point all along. If nothing changes, we'll likely be having this exact same conversation again within a couple of races. That's the real story behind Zandvoort. Not a conspiracy, not a driver being sacrificed on purpose to help a teammate. A Ferrari team principal choosing secrecy over communication with his own driver, and then standing by that choice publicly with his driver's championship hopes directly on the line. Whether that's smart, disciplined strategy or just the latest example of the same execution problem that's followed this Ferrari team through most of the season, that's genuinely up for debate, and it's worth deciding for yourself once you've heard exactly what was said in their own words, rather than the shorthand version that's already spreading online. Let's zoom out for a second though, because there's a bigger pattern underneath all of this that's easy to miss if you only look at one race weekend at a time. This is a team that, on paper, has everything it needs. A car capable of podiums and wins. A 7-time world champion in one seat who left Mercedes specifically because he believed Ferrari could get him that elusive 8th title. A genuinely quick young talent in the other seat who's been there long enough to know how the team operates under pressure. And yet, weekend after weekend this season, the conversation keeps circling back to the same theme, not raw pace, but execution. Not, was the car fast enough, but did the team make the right call at the right moment? That's a much harder problem to fix than a car upgrade. You can bring new floor parts, new front wings, new power unit modes to the track, and Ferrari has done exactly that this year. But you can't bolt on better decision-making under pressure the same way you bolt on a new side pod. That has to come from trust between the drivers and the pit wall, and from a strategy team that's willing to make a call quickly and live with the consequences rather than hesitating until the moment has already passed. Right now, based on Vasseur's own words, that trust looks shaky. Hamilton is openly comparing his new team unfavorably to his old one. Leclerc is admitting he didn't understand a call that cost him position 2, and the team principal's response to both of those complaints in the same race weekend was essentially, "I'm not worried." There's also a question here about what this does to the relationship between the two Ferrari drivers themselves, even if neither of them wants to say it directly. Leclerc has been at this team for years. He knows exactly how it feels when strategy doesn't go your way, and he's usually been fairly diplomatic about it in public. But when your teammate is a 7-time world champion who's publicly comparing you even indirectly to how his old team operated, and you're simultaneously telling the media you didn't understand why you were pitted when you were, that's not a comfortable position for either driver to be in. It doesn't have to turn into open conflict to still be a problem. Sometimes the quieter tension, the kind where both drivers are individually frustrated but neither wants to blow it up publicly, is actually harder for a team to manage than a full-blown public row would be. And then there's the timing of all this within the season itself. This isn't happening in March, when a strategic mix-up can be written off as early season teething problems while everyone's still working out tire compounds and car balance for the year. This is late August, deep into the championship, with Antonelli well clear at the top of the standings and Hamilton and Russell fighting over second on a literal tiebreaker. There is very little margin left for this kind of hesitation. 2 wasted laps in March barely register in the bigger picture. 2 wasted laps in August in a race decided by well under a second could genuinely be the difference between finishing second or third in the championship when the season wraps up in Abu Dhabi. So watch what happens over the next couple of race weekends, because that's really where this story gets resolved one way or another. If Ferrari's strategy calls start coming faster and cleaner heading into Monza and beyond, that's the team quietly proving Hamilton's criticism was justified and acting on it, even without ever admitting that in public. If the same pattern repeats, a hesitant call, a driver venting on the radio, Vasseur calmly telling everyone not to worry, then this stops being a one-off story about a single Dutch Grand Prix, and it becomes the defining storyline of Ferrari's entire season. Either way, we'll be right here breaking down exactly what was said and exactly what it means, so make sure you're subscribed before the next flashpoint hits, because with this Ferrari lineup, it's never really a question of if another one comes. It's only ever a question of when.